upon a time, in Cupertino, California, a technology company was founded by 3 individuals. But nobody ever imagined that one day it would become the tech giant that we all know today, Apple. But how did Apple become such a great tech company? And why did they become a tech company? Why did Steve Jobs name the company Apple? The amount of money than the company's first logo, a drawing of a Sir Isaac Newton. Was Apple the first to make a digital camera? This is the tale of Apple.
Was incorporated by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak in 1976. However, it took around a year's time for the founders of Apple Inc. to get it registered as a company in the United States. Prior to January 1977, Apple Inc. was an idea started at random, but the commercial effort to secure this idea was made on January 3, 1977. The place where this wonderful idea was registered was Cupertino, California. It wasn't the case that both these Steves met once and created the existing Apple company in a few meetings. Rather, they were friends. They met in 1971 through a mutual friend. With this mutual friend in between, both the Steves started using technology to create income for themselves. It was an informal arrangement where they experimented with making boxes that could allow people to conduct long-distance calls without involving any money. With the initial success of this idea, they both realized their potential in working on technology for the purpose of earning. It was back then when the idea of creating and selling computers was floated between Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. There is a completely mind-blowing story involved with this initiation of Apple Company. It is one of the milestones that the history of Apple would always point towards. Getting interested in it? Let's continue to the next section. Both Steves had the idea about the creation of computers, but they could not commercialize, especially at a large scale, without any orders or investment. So one of the first orders that Steve Jobs managed to get was from a local computer store. The terms of this order are particularly interesting. There was no sample available with Steve Jobs to show the history of Apple Inc. or the product that he or his team could make. But he entered in an arrangement where a working computer was acceptable by the management of the local store. The condition was that if Steve Jobs and his team really managed to relate something workable, the local store would buy 50 more pieces from them at a rate of $500 each. This was a huge amount at that time, so the deal was finalized. But now the question was where they would get the spare parts for making the machines. In order to resolve this problem, Steve Jobs went to Kramer Electronics. For them, relying on a random individual was not possible. But when he showed his order slip and asked to get the spare parts on a 30-day credit term, the credit manager agreed, and he was able to procure all the necessary parts that were required for the initial creation of the computer. This was the initiation of the soon-to-be billionaire company. The best part of this setting was the strategy used by the partners to finance their computers. They did not have to give away any of the shares or stock holdings to anyone, but still managed. The initial computers that were created by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were simple. Only a few important features were the part of this system, but still, they managed to grab the attention of the users. Some of these features include a TV display system, the existence of bootstrap code on ROM, and the presence of a cassette interface. All the features meant lower design components used in the computer with the existence of better speed and performance, as compared to a number of other devices available in the market. This computer was termed as Apple I, and is the initial version of the computers that have been created under the Apple brand name. Despite getting the initial 50 orders from Byte Store, it wasn't possible for both the partners to create their own vicinity or factory line where they could manufacture the computers. So one of the things that they did was borrowing the space from mutual friends, and selling a number of electronic and technology goods at varied rates. However, this was not a feasible model for the company to flourish. This is why Steves tried to get loans from the bank for this purpose. Neither the banks nor the individual lenders were willing to provide funds for the project that no one was willing to use. You'll have to be in the shoes of the people of the 70s decade to relate to this point. There was no scope of using computers at a personal level at this time. Even businesses weren't used to having computers. The conglomerates or the large organizations were the legitimate users of the computers. So investing in the creation of computers seemed absurd to the users. Initially, Ronald Wayne also became the partner of the company. It was the time when both the Steves, Wayne and Mike Mark Kula, were able to find a bank loan and signed it together. They were the initial days of the company, and its ups and downs in the company were part of the routine. However, Wayne did not want to be part of the company with such high risks, and left the business at quite an early stage. Such a setting left both the Steves as the prominent and active partners of the venture. Once the formal company was established and it had enough money to manage the computers in a better way, Wayne wanted to introduce new features to the computers. These computers were named as Apple II. Most of the design features the Apple I had were due to the limited resources available with the owner. As soon as the resources issues were settled, Wayne experimented with the inclusion of new features that could offer better functionality. This was the time when the company made direct contact with the public. West Coast Computer Fair was chosen for this purpose, which was a 2-day fair for highlighting the different types of computers. The fair came with huge success for the company because this was the place where a Japanese chemist got impressed with the design and features of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. He was the first authorized dealer of. The features and history of Apple II are not much different from Apple I. There were slight modifications and improvements in the existing design. These changes made the computer a better version. Apart from the improved TV display, the computer could store the display for some time in memory. Moreover, graphics improved the overall visuals of the computers. Later, colors were also introduced in the same version to make it a lot better than the last version of the computers that the company had produced. The Apple II, released in 1977, had great input from a designer known as Jerry Manock.